Creativity Podcast. I'm your host, Mari Riesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. Today, I've got a solo episode you won't want to miss. I'll be talking about the creativity myth and how you can reframe your experience of creativity to support a more joy-filled life. I'm looking forward to sharing more solo episodes with tips and tools for listeners to use in their own life. So here's to awakening, reclaiming, and expressing your own creativity each and every day. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. This is the podcast that explores creativity, what it means to you, how you use it, how you can tap into your inner creativity, even when life feels hard or mundane. I'm your host, Mari Riesberg, and I am thrilled to be here with you today to talk about something that often goes unnoticed: the creativity myth. We tend to think creativity as something reserved for artists, musicians, or writers, people with that special spark. But the truth is, creativity is in all of us, and it doesn't have to be big or grand to make a difference. You don't need to write a bestseller, paint a masterpiece, or perform on stage. Today, I want to share how even the simplest, most mundane activities can become creative moments that add joy, purpose, and a sense of vitality to our daily lives, all while teasing apart that beautiful myth about creativity. So grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive into the small but transformative world of creativity. So let's start by redefining what we mean by creativity. Often we associate it with big projects or artistic endeavors, but creativity can be as simple as trying something new, finding a new way to organize your workspace, or coming up with a game to entertain your kids on a rainy day. It's about engaging with life in a way that brings something new to the table, no matter how small. Creativity doesn't have to be grand. It can be as simple as trying a new food, doodling on a piece of paper during a meeting, or finding a different route on your daily walk. The key is realizing that these small, everyday moments are where creativity lives. Think of creativity as problem solving with a twist of imagination. Maybe you've been in a situation where you had to improvise a dinner from a half-empty fridge, or you needed to find a new route to work due to unexpected road closures. These might not feel like creative acts, but they absolutely are. Creativity is simply looking at things in new ways, being resourceful, and finding joy in the process. We've been conditioned to believe that creativity is a rare gift, but it's really a skill, and more importantly, a mindset that anyone can nurture. Our day-to-day lives are filled with creative potential if we just start paying attention. So let's break down this creativity myth. I want to take a moment to bust the common myth wide open. The idea that creativity requires a specific talent or expertise. One of the biggest barriers to tapping into creativity is the notion that there's a right and wrong way to be creative. Maybe you've told yourself, I'm not a creative person, or I'm not good at art, so I'm not creative. Does that sound familiar? But creativity doesn't have to be about being good at something. It's more about the process than the product. It's about engaging your mind in a way that's playful, curious, and open. Take cooking, for example. You don't need to be a professional chef to experiment with flavors. Even the act of rearranging your space can be a creative exercise that leaves you feeling more energized and engaged. So this episode, we are reclaiming creativity as something that belongs to all of us, not just the professionals. We all have the capacity to be creative in our own unique ways, and the more we practice, the more natural it becomes. Now let's dive a little bit deeper into one of the biggest misconceptions about creativity, the idea that it's an elusive quality reserved for artists, writers, or musicians, a select few who are born creative. This belief is so widespread that many people disqualify themselves before they even begin, thinking, oh, I'm not the creative type, or I'm not talented enough. But here's the truth. Creativity is not a trait. It's a skill and a mindset, one that anyone can cultivate. So today we are going to bust that myth wide open and explore why this belief is so misleading and frankly damaging. We'll also look at how redefining creativity can empower us to see it in our everyday lives, from the kitchen to the office and even in our relationships. So let's debunk the genius myth that creativity is a natural talent. One of the biggest misconceptions is the so-called genius myth, the idea that creativity is a rare talent bestowed upon a few select individuals at birth. People envision creative geniuses like Picasso or Mozart who seemed to conjure brilliance effortlessly. It's tempting to believe that they were simply born with something the rest of us lack, but this myth overlooks a critical reality. Creativity is not a static trait. It's a dynamic process. The truth is, creativity is a product of effort, curiosity, and persistence. Even the greats practiced for hours, explored countless ideas, and experienced repeated failures before they achieved their breakthroughs. Take Picasso, for instance. What many people don't realize is that he created over 50,000 works of art in his lifetime. He didn't wait for inspiration to strike. He showed up and created, often producing work that never saw the light of day. So if you've ever told yourself, I'm just not a creative person, know that what you're really saying is, I haven't practiced this yet. Creativity is more like a muscle than a gift. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. If you can approach it with a learner's mindset, willing to experiment, stumble, and grow, you'll find that creativity is accessible to everyone. Now let's move on to the productivity myth trap. Another major barrier to embracing creativity is our cultural obsession with productivity and tangible results. We are conditioned to view creativity through the lens of achievement. A finished painting, a published book, a successful business idea. If the outcome doesn't meet a certain standard, we deem it a failure. This mindset can be incredibly stifling. It turns creativity into a high-stakes endeavor where we're afraid to start because we might not produce something worthy. The irony is that true creativity thrives not when we focus on the end result, but when we allow ourselves to explore and play without judgment. Think about the last time you tried something new, maybe cooking a recipe from scratch or attempting a DIY project. If you were focused solely on the outcome, you probably felt pressured or anxious. However, if you approached it with a spirit of curiosity, the process itself was likely enjoyable regardless of how it turned out. Creativity in its purest form is about discovery. It's about asking, what happens if I do this? It's about creating without worrying whether it's good, bad, or useful. When we redefine creativity as a process rather than a product, we open up space to experiment, play, and even fail, because every effort, no matter how small, adds to our creative growth. Now, let's move into the artist stereotype. The media often portrays creative people as artists sitting in sunlit studios or writers penning novels in cozy cafes. This very narrow depiction of creativity has led many people to believe that if you're not engaged in the arts, you're not being creative. But creativity is so much broader than that. Imagine a software developer coming up with an innovative solution to a coding problem. a parent inventing a new game to entertain their kids, or a teacher designing a lesson plan that engages even the most reluctant students. Are these not acts of creativity? Of course they are, but because they don't fit the traditional mold, we often overlook them. We need to expand our definition of what creativity is and who can embody it. Creativity is not limited to the arts. It's about using imagination and ingenuity to create something new, solve problems, or simply engage with the world in a more vibrant way. When we start recognizing these moments, we realize that creativity is happening all around us, literally all the time. So I don't know if any of you have ever bumped up against this idea of creativity needing to be perfect, this myth about perfection. So this fear of imperfection and how it can kill creativity. Perfectionism is one of creativity's worst enemies. The desire to get things just right can paralyze us before we even start. How many times have you hesitated to write, draw, cook, or try something new because you were afraid it wouldn't turn out the way you imagined? The irony is that creativity requires imperfection. Mistakes and missteps are not only inevitable, they are valuable. They teach us what doesn't work, spark new ideas, and sometimes lead to unexpected breakthroughs. Some of the most famous inventions and works of art began as mistakes that the creator embraced and ran with. To overcome the perfectionism trap, try reframing your creative endeavors as experiments. I use this a lot with my clients. We look at something as an experiment to gather data rather than a project to perfect. Experiments are meant to test ideas, not to be perfect. When you view your efforts as experiments, you give yourself permission to try, fail, and learn without the crushing pressure to produce something flawless. So another part of the creativity myth is around the idea of needing everything to be right or have the right time, the right conditions. So another subtle but powerful myth is the idea that we need the right conditions to be creative. We think we need more time, better resources, or the perfect setting before we can truly create. But waiting for the ideal circumstances often means never starting at all. Some of the most innovative ideas and creative moments happen not when we have an abundance of time and resources, but when we have constraints or boundaries. Imagine a chef creating a delicious meal from limited ingredients, or a writer producing some of their best work under a tight deadline. Constraints or boundaries, whether they're time limits, resource shortages, or external challenges, often force us to think more creatively. If you find yourself waiting for that perfect moment, try shifting your perspective. What if instead you started with what you have? What if you embraced the messiness of the current moment and asked, what can I create right now with the tools that I have? This shift can unlock a surprising amount of creative energy. So lastly, I want to talk about the comparison trap. This is one of the biggest creativity killers of all. Comparison. With social media showcasing everyone's highlight reels, it's easy to fall into the trap of comparing our creative efforts to others. We see polished projects, successful endeavors, and flawless creations and think, I could never do that. But what we don't see is the messy, imperfect process behind the scenes, the drafts, the mistakes, the doubts. Creativity is not a linear process, and no two creative journeys look the same. If you find yourself stuck in the comparison trap, remind yourself that you're comparing your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. The best way to break free from comparison is to focus inward. Measure your progress against where you were last week or last month, not where someone else is today. celebrate your own small creative victories, whether it's trying a new recipe, coming up with a clever solution at work, or even taking 5 minutes to doodle. So, creativity myths can be powerful obstacles, but they're just that, myths. The reality is that creativity is accessible to everyone. It doesn't require special talent or conditions. It requires openness, a willingness to play, and the courage to try. When we redefine creativity as a mindset rather than a rare gift, we liberate ourselves to see creative potential in the smallest acts. So, next time you find yourself saying, "I'm not creative," pause and challenge that thought. Ask instead, how can I practice creativity today? Because the truth is, the world is full of creative possibilities, just waiting for you to notice them. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the creativity myth. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend who could use a little more creativity in their day. You can find me on Instagram at Sustaining Creativity, and I'd love to hear your creative moments, big or small. Until next time, keep exploring, keep playing, and remember, creativity is all around you. Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.